to this high-level panel on transboundary water governance for sustainable development. Before diving into our discussion this morning, I would like to express our deep gratitude to Egypt for its exemplary commitment and leadership in the cause of water and climate. Today, we will explore various facets of cross-border water governance, highlighting innovative approach and successful models of cooperation. We will address current issues such as water scarcities and ongoing pressures, while identifying sustainable solutions for the management of conservation of these vital resources. We will highlight the need to strengthen cooperation among nations through policies and agreements that facilitate data sharing, joint forecasting, and information management. This panel will emphasize the role of water policies in establishing transboundary rural communities and promoting inclusive governance models. Together, we have the opportunity to forge a future where cross-border cooperation becomes a lever for sustainable and peace between riparian states. Finally, we will discuss the support of regional and international communities in addressing the growing challenges posed by climate change. And ladies and gentlemen, we will start our panel by having a huge high-level panel with a panel composed by His Excellency Dr. Cheikh Tidiane Dièye, Minister of Hydraulics and Sanitation of Senegal. To your applause, please. His Excellency Remy Majodina, Minister of Hydraulics and Sanitation, Republic of South Africa. To your applause. His Excellencies Anjus Masukuka, Minister of Water, Climate and Rural Development from Zimbabwe. To your applause. Dr. Hassan Ali, PhD in Water Resources Engineering, Head of Water Resources Technical Organization, Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resource, Sudan. To your applause. Dr. Komlan Sakbana, Legal Officer, Secretary, Legal Officer Affairs, Cabinet of Legal Officer, Secretary of Water Convention, INICI. To your applause. Jasmine Moussa, Counselor for Legal Affairs, Cabinet of Egypt, Ministers of Foreign Affairs. To your applause. Now I will start the panel. Egyptian Minister will join us in this meeting. He will give a statement for this panel. And we will now begin our panel with Dr. Cheikh Tidiane Dièye, His Excellency. We know that Senegal is a country, when we talk about Senegal, we know that transboundary water cooperation is more important, is our landmark. And what are the benchmarks of success and major challenges in transboundary water cooperation within OMVS Senegal? You have the floor.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, M. Diatta. Parler des succès ou des résultats des organismes de bassin ou de nos expériences en matière d'intégration et de gestion partagée de la ressource eau dans notre espace, c'est presque comme raconter une histoire, c'est comme raconter l'histoire des peuples qui, depuis la nuit des temps, ont partagé cette zone par la prise de conscience de la nécessité pour eux, pour ces peuples, de ne jamais voir cette ressource comme un motif de concurrence ou de compétition, mais plus de la voir, cette ressource, comme un outil de co-développement et de construction d'une prospérité partagée. Ça, c'est un legs que les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, après les indépendances, ont réussi à tirer en ayant conscience de nos expériences historiques, de notre historicité, de l'évolution de nos peuples qui sont restés pendant longtemps autour de ces bassins pour dire que l'eau doit être la principale des ressources qui peuvent construire le développement. Et lorsque, sous la vision qu'aujourd'hui, avec le recul, nous saluons, nos chefs d'État et de gouvernement ont compris que les deux grands fleuves, qui l'un étant traversant le Sénégal à l'intérieur, l'autre étant au nord et que nous partageons avec d'autres, ils ont compris qu'il fallait mettre en place toute une machine, toute une machinerie, des institutions, une vision, des politiques, des process et une forme d'organisation socio-économique. Et c'est ce qui a donné lieu à deux grandes organisations que vous connaissez et qui aujourd'hui font l'objet d'évaluation, font l'objet d'études, font l'objet même d'appréciation par les autres, d'autres parties du monde, qui ont vu dans leur mode de fonctionnement des outils de développement. C'est l'Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Sénégal et l'Organisation pour la mise en valeur du fleuve Gambie. En les ayant mis en place, nos États ont compris que, et ça j'ai l'habitude moi-même de le dire en tant que ministre en charge de l'eau, je ne suis pas en compétition avec mon collègue en charge de l'énergie ou du pétrole, mais j'ai l'habitude de dire que l'eau est même plus importante dans le développement économique de nos pays que les ressources comme les hydrocarbures et autres. Puisque la ressource eau est la seule qui, lorsqu'elle n'est pas présente dans un pays, cette civilisation ne peut pas prospérer. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle nous avons mis en place ces organismes de bassin en ayant à cœur de promouvoir le développement socio-économique à partir de la ressource eau et de mettre en place toutes les institutions nécessaires pour porter et promouvoir ce que nous appelons aujourd'hui l'hydrodiplomatie. La diplomatie de l'eau n'est pas seulement ou ne relève pas seulement d'une affaire conceptuelle, c'est une réalité qui a permis aujourd'hui de voir que dans cette partie du monde, pendant longtemps, on a vu l'eau comme la principale source d'union, de rapprochement et de solidarité entre les peuples. Et ça, c'est aujourd'hui quelque chose de très, très remarquable. Et même lorsque cette ressource, notamment les fleuves, pour des raisons liées au changement climatique et à autres, crée quelques soucis, au moment où nous parlons, le fleuve Sénégal connaît quelques débordements liés aux précipitations, aux quantités de pluie importantes qui sont tombées dans les différents pays lors de cet hivernage, du fait justement du changement climatique. Et même la gestion de ces crises ou de ces difficultés liées aux crues ou au débordement du fleuve sont aussi des phénomènes que nous gérons ensemble. Donc nous gérons la ressource eau pour en faire un moteur de développement, un moteur de prospérité, mais aussi qui nous permet de lutter contre tout ce qui peut être source de désunion, de malentendus ou malheureusement de conflits, parce que c'est le cas dans d'autres parties du monde. Mais dans notre espace, nous avons réussi à réduire ces difficultés. Et aujourd'hui, l'un des principaux résultats, c'est d'abord la question de la gestion, non seulement de l'eau, mais de l'effet du produit induit par cette gestion concernée, c'est l'énergie. Nous avons de très grands projets hydroélectriques dans notre sous-région, aussi bien au niveau de l'OMVS qu'au niveau de l'OMVG, qui fournissent de l'énergie. Et cette énergie hydroélectrique, qui est énergie propre, mais aussi bon marché, beaucoup moins chère que l'énergie fossile, qui contribue très fortement au développement économique et social de nos communautés. Nous avons en plus de l'énergie, l'eau agricole, et aujourd'hui les plus grands projets aussi de transformation et de production agricole dans la plupart des pays, en tout cas c'est le cas au Sénégal, mais c'est aussi le cas dans certains autres, c'est aussi l'eau que nous tirons de nos fleuves partagés à travers des mécanismes de concertation et de gestion collégiale qui permettent à chacun de prélever ce dont il a besoin pour pouvoir faire amorcer son développement et le soutenir sans toucher aux intérêts ou aux droits des autres pays à en faire de même. Donc c'est un peu ça l'expérience qui est partagée un peu partout dans le monde et que nous allons continuer à promouvoir et à suivre, et c'est cette expérience que nous partageons aujourd'hui ici dans cet espace.
Thank you, Minister, for highlighting Senegal's vision on water and the position that Senegal considers water as a lever for peace and stability. And he shared examples from OMVS and Gambia River Basin and Senegal River Basin as tool of cooperation at transboundary level. Now we now ask host country Egypt not only demonstrate its willingness to tackle the complex challenges of managing shared water resources, but also embodies the spirit of cooperation needed to address the growing need for water in the context of climate variability. And who better than Prof. Dr. Hani Sewilam, who despite his very busy schedule, we know that this week is very busy for you, but I will give you the floor to introduce and to give your statement. Thank you very much, Excellency.
Okay. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, welcome to Cairo Water Week 2024, a key event for tackling global water management challenges. This session is crucial as it focuses on the importance of effective transboundary water governance, highlighting the need for collective and sustainable solutions that benefit all Iberian states. Water, essential for life, has a unique ability to connect us beyond the political, cultural, and the economic divides. Transboundary rivers make up about 60% of the global freshwater flows, serving over 3 billion people, 37% of the world's population. This highlights the urgent need for effective transboundary water governance to promote poverty alleviation, health, gender equality, clean energy access, and ecosystem protection. A recent UN water report on transboundary water cooperation and SDG 6.5.2 shows we are badly off track, with a global average of just 59%. This troubling trend reveals that many transboundary basins lack effective cooperation, emphasizing the urgent need for greater political commitment and action. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to emphasize that to effectively strengthen transboundary cooperation and ensure the sustainable and equitable management of shared water resources, we must, first, establish operational agreements that adhere to the core principles of customary international law governing waterways, namely equitable, reasonable utilization, the obligation not to cause harm, and prior notification and consultation among Iberian states. Second, it is crucial to foster inclusive cooperation arrangements involving all basin countries as a shared vision and commitment to sustainable resources management and essential to preventing unsustainable water utilization, harmful development projects, and escalating regional tensions. Third, shared water basins must be viewed as integrated systems. Upstream regions mostly have abundant green and blue water, while downstream nations rely primarily on blue water. To ensure sustainable management, Iberian countries must prioritize effective use of renewable water resources. This includes green and blue water, optimizing upstream agriculture productivity and minimizing downstream impacts. A collaborative approach allows all countries to flourish while honoring their neighboring rights and taking into account that alternative and conventional resources cannot fully replace the value of natural, sustainable fresh water. Ladies and gentlemen, historical evidence shows that reaching agreements on shared waters often requires lengthy and inclusive negotiations that engage all key countries, ensuring ample time for discussions to achieve fair and lasting outcomes. Successful examples of international river basin agreements, such as the Senegal River Basin Development Organization, the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, and the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine, demonstrate the power of collaboration. Ultimately, the success of these arrangements hangs on unsustained political will. Effective transboundary water governance is not a short sprint. It requires continuous commitment and the effort to foster sustainable development and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to seize this occasion to emphasize that promoting transboundary cooperation is a cornerstone of Egypt's water policy. Egypt has consistently played a key role in fostering collaboration, notably through the establishment of the Nile Basin Initiative, NBI, in 1999. Egypt has consistently played a key role in fostering collaboration, notably through the establishment of the Nile Basin Initiative, NBI, in 1999. I'm repeating. We are committed to strengthening cooperation among all countries, sharing our vital water resources based on win-win outcomes and the principles of no harm and prior notification. Nevertheless, Egypt suspended its participation in NBI technical activities in 2010 due to breaches of consensus-based decision-making. We remain confident in returning to the cooperative principles that have historically guided the NBI. Egypt is committed to leading efforts to prioritize dialogue and partnership among riparian states, ensuring equitable resources management, regional stability, and sustainable development. In this context, we believe non-cooperative actions like Ethiopia's construction of the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, without adhering to international law, as a major challenge to transboundary cooperation, ignoring the essential principle of cooperation, especially the duty to consult and conduct socio-economic and environmental impact studies. There is no such a dam on earth that doesn't have sustainable planning, socio-economic and environmental studies. Undermines equitable and reasonable resources use and risks causing significant harm. Ladies and gentlemen, in times of scarcity, water has the power to unite nations through collaboration based on shared interests and respect. This cooperation not only addresses immediate challenges, but also strengthens diplomatic ties and builds trust. As our world becomes more interconnected, we must harness this potential to promote stability, peace, and sustainable development. Let us commit to fostering collaboration on transboundary water governance, prioritizing cooperation over conflict, and transforming challenges into opportunities for peaceful and prosperous future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this invaluable insight to our discussions. You highlight the role of international water laws and integrated cooperation and integrated systems. We know that you have a very busy schedule today. You have many sessions. We know that you will leave the session when your other session will come. I will give the floor to the next speaker, His Excellency Penny Majodina, Minister of Hydraulics and Sanitation, Republic of South Africa. To your applause, please. What are the key success and major challenges in transboundary water cooperation within SADC region? We know that South Africa is one of the SADC members, and tell us about your region and what are the major challenges regarding the water cooperation. Thank you. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much, moderator. Greetings to all the excellencies and to our host, I really salute you for bringing us together here. I'm bringing the warm greetings from South Africa. If you look at the map of the continent, you'll find South Africa down there at the bottom. There was a reason for South Africa to be there at the bottom. We are sharing rivers with 7 countries out of 10 in the continent, and we feel very honored that we were put there by the boundaries to be there. However, we think that the boundaries that we have in the continent should be taken as soft boundaries, and therefore we are a family. We are surrounded by water, and we must therefore share water. Sharing is caring. Allow me, moderator, to start by saying your question resonates with the slogan that says, "Water knows no borders," which renders this gathering even more important to South Africa, because we do feel, as a firm believer of international water cooperation, in this regard, we want to pay particular attention to the relationship that we have with our neighbors. You don't fight with your neighbors, you embrace, you reach out, you work together, you work as a collective. Let me share with you that South Africa landscape of transboundary water is as follows. I respond with full commitment on transboundary matters in line with our constitution and the policy. Furthermore, South Africa is a signatory of 1997 Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational Users of International Water Courses. At the regional level, South Africa is also a signatory of the South African Development Community Revised Protocol on Shared Water Courses. For you to be able to stick to what we have agreed upon, you must be guided and governed by the protocols, and we respect those protocols. These protocols that I've mentioned above, they foster cooperation for judicious, sustainable, and coordinated management, protection and utilization of shared water courses, and advance SADC agenda for regional integration. Without water, there is no development. Without water, there is no economic growth. Without water, there is no livelihoods, and therefore, cooperation is central. South Africa has contributed towards transboundary water governance at SADC via several commissions at a bilateral and at a multilateral levels. We therefore have regional basin level agreement in which, for the management of shared water resources, we are happy. We are working very well with Zimbabwe, my neighbor here, Lesotho, Namibia, Mozambique, Eswatini. So we are saying we are a family, and therefore let's share the resources that are there. Let no one have a singular ownership on a river. Let's share those boundaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your message. You highlight the centrality of water cooperation. Water knows no borders, and we must cooperate with our neighbors if we want cooperation to be succeed. Thank you for this insight from South Africa. Now I will give the floor to His Excellency Anxious Jong Masukuka, Minister of Fisheries, Water and Rural Development of Zimbabwe. What are the benchmarks of success and key challenge in transboundary water cooperation within ZAMCOM? Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to the organizers for inviting Zimbabwe to participate at this very august event, the 7th Cairo Water Week and also the 9th Africa Water Week. I think some context is relevant. Well before ZAMCOM was established in 2011, by 1957, 2 countries, Zimbabwe, then Southern Rhodesia, and Zambia, then Northern Rhodesia, came up with this cooperation, noting that water is a finite resource that had to be deployed judiciously to benefit the region, developed the Zambezi River Authority, as it is now known now. And the Kariba Dam, which is the biggest inland lake in our part of the world, is 64 billion cubic meters worth of water. And the two countries generate 2,200 megawatts daily of electricity out of that. So well before Zamcom, there was already perceived a need to collaborate. Then in 2000, as eloquently described by my neighbor from South Africa, we had this Zamcom, Zambezi Water Commission. 2000, we had the SADC Protocol on Water, which then gave birth to the Zamcom in 2011. But the region in the past has a very common developmental ambition, the very strong political relations between the nations, because for independence, these nations waged joint struggles to dislodge the colonial systems. That was bound then, and that led to the Southern African Development Community. And that then established the 2000 SADC Protocol on Water, which then, that very strong political basis allowed Zamcom to be formed. Zamcom comprises 8 riparian states, and they meet annually. There is the SADC Council of Ministers. They are assisted by a technical committee, and they have a full-time secretariat. There is a framework that members agree on, and to ensure that what members agree in the framework is implemented, there is need to domesticate the framework. And this has happened in 6 of the 8 riparian states, where there is actually local law in legislation to undergirdle and the transformation that is sought under Zamcom. And Zamcom is a framework where there is joint planning, there is joint monitoring of water in terms of disaster risk management. There is also the recognition that individual countries can develop, but they must do so taking into account that water is this common resource that not just a constitutional right for people, but also an enabler for economic development. So there is, within the Zamcom framework, a notified principle that if you wanted to develop a dam outside the main river, you still had to notify the other states that this is your intention, and at the next meeting there is some discussion. But each of these projects, before any project is undertaken, of course, you have the environmental impact assessments, and there are also the requirements of environmental, social, and governance reporting that then come with that. Zimbabwe and Zambia currently, under the Zambezi River Authority framework, are actually now looking at the Patoka Dam, which is a 3,000 megawatt electricity project that they are jointly planning. And in terms of that Zamcom framework, the 2 countries notify the other 6 countries of their intention to develop. And if there is need to have some representations, you have some representations. So there is also a mechanism within that Zamcom framework of conflict resolution, and that you need to do so amicably and within the within the framework of Zamcom. We have not had any disagreement within Zamcom because of the nature in which Zamcom was formed, very strong political will by our leaders, and a legislative framework that undergirdles the performance of Zamcom, but also that there is this full-time secretariat that constantly relates to member states on important matters. It allows this flow of information to be two-way between the member states and the secretariat. So any issue that arises is actually dealt with within that common system. So that is how Zamcom has developed. We look forward to the continued development of Zamcom. You need to uplift. I think one of the fundamental issues is that when you have communities within the 8 riparian states benefiting from the joint planning, then that strengthens the institution. And that's what we have seen in the past, and we hope that will continue into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. You highlight the SADC protocol on water, a very strong political basis that found your cooperation at the Zambezi rivers. You also highlight the important role of very strong political commitment that's laid the foundation of water cooperation. I think that to having cooperation succeed, we must have a strong political commitment from head of states and from high-level authorities on countries. This is a very important role. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Hassan Ali. Historical evidence shows that achieving agreements on shared water resources often involving long and inclusive negotiations. How does Sudan approach such extended negotiation, particularly within the Nile Basin Initiative? Doctor, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, moderator, for having me here. In fact, as we know, Sudan is. It is noticed that all or most of the water, transport water, is coming from the outside countries. So Sudan needs more cooperation and need more intensive dialogue between the other countries so as to reach the consensus. Regarding the issue of the historical issues, nowadays, in 1999, we developed what you call the Empire and Nile Basin Initiative. And this Nile Basin Initiative, it is a good mechanism for the transboundary cooperations among the countries. And in this Nile Basin Initiative, in fact, we have started with what you call the confidence buildings. We just make some kind of confidence building among the countries so as to reach the consensus for these transboundary issues. So in Sudan, nowadays, it is very important for us to make cooperations between Sudan and the other countries, because as I said before, most of the water is coming from the outside countries. So there is no any alternatives to overcome these problems. Instead of making some kind of cooperations among the countries so as to reach a consensus and something like that. In Sudan also, we face a lot of problems regarding political problems and other factors which will enforce us to look about the other mechanisms for the corporations. If there is no corporations in any basins, we cannot reach the optimal use of water utilizations. Also, it is in Sudan, we believe that we have to recognize the international law regarding the issue of water resources. If we didn't release the international law for these water resources, we cannot reach a consensus. We cannot reach in a very good way. Also, regarding the issue of negotiation, you have to negotiate in a good manners, in a good faith, so as to reach the consensus and to reach our goals in the basins. In Sudan also, we put historical idea, just like what we mean in Zambezi and Senegal. These guys in Zambezi and Senegal, they established a very good mechanism for the cooperation regarding the issue of cooperation for these transboundary issues. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much for giving as example Senegal and Zambezi. Dr. Komlan, I will give the floor to Prof. Attila Tanzi, Chair of International Law at the University of Bologna. How can the principle of equitable and reasonable use and no significant harm protect communities facing water scarcities that are dependent on transboundary watercourses for their livelihoods, particularly rural communities. What is the role of compensation in this regard?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to the organizers for this prestigious invitation to be sitting among such a prestigious panel. I am sitting here, yes, as a scholar, but also as the chair of the implementation committee of the UNEC Convention of 1992, which is also represented most effectively by my friend and colleague Komlan Sangbanan. And based on that experience, I'll be happy to share with you and with our African colleagues the experience that we have developed within the UNECE Convention in combination with the New York Convention of 1997 for about 24 years. And the major development which is germane to today's discussion and should be of interest to you is the fact that we now have this convention, which was originally envisaged for just a pan-European region, is now open to accession from all over the world. And since 2016, we have new 14 parties from outside Europe, 10 of which come from Africa. And since the gist of the convention is to promote fruitful and constructive cooperation, that looks like a positive framework that, starting from one region of the world, we are catering to the rest of the world, and we are very pleased to see that African countries are most interested region. Now, I have noted the carefully crafted question. We are not just discussing the two main substantive pillars of international water law as it has evolved over the centuries, equitable and reasonable utilization on the one hand, and no harm principle, just and purely in interstate relations. But the carefully crafted question that you put to me is, how do they operate with regard to local communities and populations dependent, particularly rural communities? Let me, on a preliminary basis, recall that originally the equitable utilization principle was devised as a rational legal tool for equitable allocation of water quantity. And the no harm rule had developed generally and then incorporated into international water law, focusing more on quality, water quality issues. I think that nowadays such a distinction is no longer valid, and this is not my extravagant creativity in interpretation, is to be found in the hard and fast letter of both conventions, the 1997 convention and the UNEC convention, which provides for the equitable allocation of waters, taking into account also the ecological factors involved in water quantity. There's no use to have plenty of water if the water is of no use or is polluted. And this legal concept is well translated by the concept which seems to be endorsed also by environmental engineers, environmental or ecological, if you wish, flow, which has been endorsed by the arbitration tribunal back in 2013 in the Kishan-Ganga case between Pakistan and India. Now that we have this physical, legal, political, and scientific merger between the two principles, which work in tandem and in an integrated manner in interstate relations, the question comes to, what about communities dependent? Now, there is an interest in, particularly in the New York Convention, on population dependent on the watercourse in each watercourse states. So interstate relations are the bigger framework, but as we say in Latin, every law, public law, eventually caters to individuals. Now, this point was very clear in the mind of the negotiators who devised the principle of equitable utilization in a very humane, sustainable manner. Article 6, which complements Article 5, providing the factors for assessing whether a given use is equitable and reasonable, places great emphasis on social and economic needs of states, but also separately singles out the factors pertaining to the population dependent on the watercourse in each watercourse states. And this provision is to be integrated with Article 10 of the New York Convention, which provides priority among factors and considerations in assessing the equitable use and the admissibility of a given use under international law to the protection of vital human needs. And if I may conclude on this point, water quality is affecting, as much as water quantity, local populations because rural communities cannot avail themselves of polluted water. And there, the Protocol on Water and Health to the UNEC Convention, which is not open to accession from non-pan-European countries, will still bear legal relevance in an integrated interpretation of customary law, New York Convention, and UNEC Convention under Article 31(3)(c) of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which supports an integrated approach, and I think that the states parties to the UNEC Convention will interpret the new UNEC Convention according to the scientific standards on water quality developed by the UNEC and the World Health Organization, which you find in that protocol. I suppose I have to stop there because my time must be absolutely up.
Thank you for highlighting the important role of water conventions. And we must pay particular attention to local communities, as you said, regarding particularly water quality, where we know that local people are facing water quality problems, and we need to solve these issues with international water laws also. Dr. Komlan, you are legal officer at the Secretariat of the Water Conventions. What measure and best practice are being adopted globally to address the implication of the global water crisis? You have the floor, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished participants. First of all, allow me to thank the organizers for inviting the Water Convention Secretariat, which is hosted by the UNECE, to participate in this important panel. First, because coming to the measures, several distinguished panelists before me mentioned the fact that transboundary cooperation is really critical when it comes to tackle global crises, including climate change, environmental degradations. And as you may be aware, the report of the third SDG 652 monitoring exercise has been released a few days ago. I will base my intervention mainly on the result of this report that I'm inviting you to have a read, because they provide a couple of insight information on the status for transboundary water cooperation globally. And when we take this report, globally, the SDG 652 results show that we have a kind of mixed bag of, in terms of adoption of measures and also best practices. But before also coming to those measures, let me give you some facts. First, only 43 countries have almost all their transboundaries rivers, lakes, and aquifers. That means 90% covered by operational arrangements as of today. But as we know, those arrangements are really key when it comes to reconciling competing interests over transboundary water resources, and also developing more bespoke measures to address water crisis, environmental degradation, and climate change at the transboundary level. And secondly, the current rate of adoption of operational agreements is slow. Only 8 countries increased their coverage of operational arrangement from 2020 to 2023, with even 2 countries where the value, when it comes to the calculation of the indicator, decreased. So at this rate, we can say that barely more than a third of countries sharing transboundary water will have their rivers, lakes, and aquifers covered by operational arrangement by 2030. So that means there is a lot that's still to be done. We have a kind of diverse progress in the different regions, because we also need to consider that in the different regions, the progress or the calculation of this indicator, 652, are a bit different in terms of progress that have been made by the different countries. I don't want to go in detail on this, but want to say that actually Europe, North America, and Sub-Saharan Africa show the highest levels of coverage of operational arrangements, which is, I would say, positive because we are in Africa, and to see that with spirit of cooperation exists, legal arrangements are in place, joint bodies are set up, and of course, while it's still a lot of to do, there is kind of very good examples and also good practices that can be assured. So when it comes to the examples of measures and best practices, we receive in total 129 information, so in terms of data information provided by countries, so 129 countries that provide those data, which, as I say, provide a kind of knowledge of activities that countries have undertaken to progress on cooperation. In relation to climate change, because I want to make a specific focus on that, and because this report have a dedicated or focus on climate change measures, how countries really try to incorporate climate change measures on, or transboundary cooperation on climate change strategies. When it comes to the agreements, first, the report highlights that where climate change considerations have been incorporated, we have many new agreements. We can give the example, for instance, of the 2019 agreement between Mozambique and Zimbabwe on the Bozi River, or also the 2017 bilateral agreement between Ecuador and Peru on their shared waters, where we have specific provisions dealing with climate change. We can also see that some of the joint bodies, such, for instance, River Basin Organization, we can mention the International Joint Commission between Canada and US, which is quite interesting also to see how the climate change guidance framework, which is designed to mainstream climate change consideration within a planning of operation. And now when it comes to the data information exchange, the report highlights that some of the work being done in Okavango, the Lower Mekong, the Gambia River, and the Amazon to share data and information, deepen the knowledge and understanding in terms of enhancing preparedness of countries to mitigate the impact of extreme events, such flood, also droughts. And maybe a last one, we can mention experiences of countries in mainstreaming climate change consideration into basin-wide planning. So you have this case, for instance, between Bolivia and Peru on the binational master plan that they have on the Titicaca Basin, but also Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, which embedded climate change consideration in strategic plan for the Chu Talas River Basin. But however, all those exemplars are really, I would say, important, shows the progress, but a lot still to be done. And I will finish by that because I'm providing 3 examples. First, cooperation in addressing droughts or climate change adaptation is only present in less than half of the 291 river and lake basins mentioned in the national reports that we received. There are also only 14 of basins that have joint climate change adaptation strategies, and only 20% have joint disaster risk reduction strategy in place. So that means we need to quadruple our efforts if we want to reach 2030 in terms of progressing in reinforcing the transboundary cooperation, and that means also adopt arrangement where they are lacking, but also tailor the arrangement that exists in a way to incorporate some climate change context to tackle the global crisis that we are facing. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Komlan, for this insight. Despite several best practices that we have around the world, we saw that we have a long way to go regarding cooperation issue around the world. And we saw lack of legal arrangement in a lot of shared river basins, even in Africa. We have a lot of challenge regarding these issues. Thank you for this insight. Now I will give the floor to Jasmine Moussa, Counselor for Legal Affairs, Cabinet of Egypt's Ministry Foreign of Affairs. How does international human rights law protect downstream communities facing water scarcity? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. The question about human rights is a particularly important one because water is a human right, and water is fundamental to human dignity and fundamental to right itself. So we tend to look at water from the prism of the law of water courses. We talked a little bit, we heard from previous speakers about the 1992 UNECE Convention, the 1997 New York Convention. And both of these conventions take a rather state-centric approach to cooperation in the utilization of water. So this is why the human rights paradigm is particularly important. And when we look at the legal framework governing the use of water, as I said, there is the law of water courses, which is mainly customary international law, but also reflected in large part in the 2 conventions. Also international human rights law, and international environmental law, the law of state responsibility, many different broader frameworks of law that apply, but that are often unseen when we talk about the transboundary uses of a watercourse. So the challenges that we face really is how do these different frameworks interact? And Professor Tanzi talked about the importance of an integrated approach and the importance of overcoming a siloed approach to essentially protect downstream communities and protect vulnerable communities. And the whole point of human rights law is to protect those that are most vulnerable. So in a situation where the World Meteorological Organization is warning us not just of global warming, but also the phenomenon of global drying, where increased water scarcity and water variability is particularly impacting communities, and in particular rural communities and subsistence farmers, and those who depend on agriculture for their livelihoods. This is where we need to be filling in the gaps and looking at how we can focus on human rights law to answer the challenge where the law of watercourses is silent. So Professor Tanzi had talked about the two cardinal principles of equitable and reasonable use and no significant harm. And again, that's a state-centric approach. It mainly focuses on one state's equitable use versus the obligation not to harm another state. And those two principles also interact in the 97 Convention with what we have reflected in Article 10, which is the priority of vital human needs. But essentially, the 97 Convention doesn't really define what vital human needs are. And in this context, we have found that several special rapporteurs within the Human Rights Council have talked about how to define the most vulnerable and the most needy individuals and persons when it comes to the transboundary uses of water. And although we talk about in human rights, all human rights being indivisible, inalienable, and on an equal footing, but there are some core human rights obligations which will tend to take priority over others. And the human right to water should be conceived in such a broad manner. The 97 Convention addresses vital human needs, and it also addresses in the procedural obligations of prior notification and consultation the need to conduct environmental impact assessments. And again, there is a growing soft law body that talks about also not just environmental impact assessments, but also human rights and social impact assessments. And we need to start thinking about the transboundary watercourse as a single unit. So instead of looking at the typical human rights paradigm where one state is essentially engaged with obligations vis-à-vis persons within their own territory, we need to look beyond the territorial scope of human rights and see how does this apply extraterritorially in a transboundary setting. So the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation is one of those human rights that has developed quite recently. It has always existed, one could say, in existing human rights instruments, but only in 2010 was it actually declared to be a standalone right of human rights to not to water, but to safe drinking water and sanitation. First in the General Assembly, then in the Human Rights Council. And in the Human Rights Council, it was conceived as essentially a right that is linked to an adequate standard of living, conceived as a progressive right, but also reflected in other human rights treaties, such as the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and others. But the challenge really to the human right to water is its normative content. Again, as I said, the lens through which we look at water is a very narrow lens, the right to safe drinking water and sanitation, whereas we should be looking at water as being interconnected with other human rights, the right to food, the right to health, the right to life, the right to livelihoods. Okay, lost my slides.
You have the mic. I can ask you the one last question for you.
Have I gone over my time? Would you like me to wrap up?
Okay, you have 1 minute to
Okay,
conclude
I'll wrap
this
up I
questions.
put my timer,
Yeah.
so it should be going off soon. But just to wrap up very briefly, in the General Assembly and in the Human Rights Council, the resolutions that have been adopted on this subject have really tried to divorce the law of watercourses from human rights law. And so these resolutions talk about affirming the importance of regional and international technical cooperation without any prejudice to questions of international water law, or with the understanding that, that the human right to water has no bearing on issues of international water law. And this is really an inadequate way of looking at how the right to water and the law of watercourses interact, because essentially the special procedures of the Human Rights Council and the International Committee on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights have recognized that the human right to water applies extraterritorially and that states have an obligation towards the human rights of downstream communities beyond their borders. And so just to wrap up, an invitation to really look at a fully integrated approach to how to protect downstream communities without focusing only on the lens of international water law, but also looking at the broader aspects of international human rights law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your presentation shows how we must take into account the two water conventions on water, the international human rights laws, human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation, in the context, particularly in the context of share water basins. I would like to ask you a second question. Jasmine, how can international law be developed in order to better protect communities facing water scarcity?
Thank you very much. The second question...
2 minutes.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
very much linked to the first, so I don't really have much to add. The only thing that I would say is, as I said, there are many normative gaps and challenges, and that the law needs further development in this area. So perhaps we could start thinking about a protocol to the 1997 convention that integrates human rights aspects, or that provides further clarity on how equitable and reasonable use and no significant harm interact, or that focuses particularly on situations of water scarcity. These conventions were conceived at a time when climate change was not as well recognized as an issue as it is today, where human rights was not center stage. These conventions, I mean, the 97 convention was developed in the 70s. So we need an update, we need more robust mechanisms, and we need a broader approach to the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monsieur le ministre, nous savons qu'au Sénégal, le Sénégal partage deux fleuves, le fleuve Gambie, le fleuve Sénégal. Comment les ressources tirées, les bénéfices tirés de cette coopération bénéficient à l'économie de nos pays et participent à la construction de la résilience collective?
Merci. Effectivement, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure quand je faisais l'introduction, c'est d'abord déjà au moment de la création de ces organisations, toute l'éthique ou la philosophie, cette volonté qui sous-tendait le vœu des États de voir cette ressource comme le pilier de leur développement au fil des années et des générations. Puisque aussitôt, au moment du démarrage, les chefs d'État et de gouvernement ont compris que pour des pays qui sont pour la plupart des pays en développement aux ressources limitées, ayant conscience de l'importance vitale de la ressource eau pour bâtir leur développement socio-économique, sachant qu'il fallait développer l'agriculture, et qui dit développer l'agriculture passe par l'eau, il fallait la maîtrise de l'énergie pour aussi différents aspects du développement économique. Et tout ça a fait que c'était au cœur des politiques publiques de dire on fait tout ce qu'il faut pour ensemble bâtir les politiques de chaque État autour de la gestion concertée et intégrée de la ressource. Mais ça, c'était pour le faire, il fallait aussi régler, bien entendu, tous les aspects liés à la coopération, autour de la diplomatie, le vivre ensemble autour des bassins. Ne plus le voir comme un élément de structuration de politique de chaque État, mais comme un ensemble de structuration d'une vision régionale ou sous-régionale pour que la problématique de la prospérité partagée ou du co-développement, le développement solidaire, ne soit pas seulement un concept. Donc c'est un peu une sorte d'exemple que ces États ont voulu montrer qu'il est possible, partageant des fleuves, partageant des bassins, d'en faire un élément central autour duquel chacun viendra non seulement pour prélever ce qu'il lui faut pour son propre développement, mais le faire aussi en relation avec ce que les autres ont le droit aussi de faire. Donc je crois que la dernière présentation a parlé beaucoup de la question des droits à l'eau. Si on fait la jonction, c'était déjà une vision qui sous-tendait la création des organisations autour du fleuve Sénégal et du fleuve Gambie. C'était de dire cette ressource que nous avons, c'est comme un don. On en a parlé ce matin en parlant du Nil comme un don. Là également, ce sont des fleuves que les pays ont voulu utiliser comme une ressource partagée pour leur développement. Donc c'est un peu ça qui guide toujours la logique des organismes de bassin qui sont restés jusqu'ici des moteurs de coopération et qui, aujourd'hui, on le voit, j'ai dit tout à l'heure que pour l'accès à l'énergie dans la plupart des pays qui, autrement, s'ils n'avaient pas mis ensemble leurs moyens, leurs énergies et leurs visions pour la production ensemble, auraient peut-être eu du mal, chacun de leur côté, de faire les résultats qu'ils ont pu faire ensemble. Donc c'est vraiment un exemple parfait de ce que la collaboration ou la coopération autour de cette ressource peut faire. Et c'est encore plus, ou ce sera encore plus le cas dans le futur, puisqu'il est de plus en plus convenu ou accepté que chacun des pays doit prélever, en fait, ce n'est pas une logique de partage, mais faire de la ressource eau le moteur du développement, de la transformation agricole et agro-industrielle. On doit encourager tous les États membres à pouvoir utiliser la ressource comme levier de développement. Et dans les prochaines années, chacun des États de notre sous-région va sans doute mieux bâtir ses stratégies de développement, de transformation structurelle en utilisant le levier de la ressource eau. Donc c'est vraiment, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, un exemple à promouvoir et à partager partout dans le monde. Ce sont des exemples de réussite et je crois que les autres parties du continent africain où il y a aussi des exemples ou des expériences de co-gestion ou de gestion partagée de la ressource eau doivent davantage renforcer les partages d'expériences, les leçons apprises dans les différentes régions pour que justement cette ressource, et ça je le dis à chaque fois que je prends la parole quelque part, pour dire que la question de l'accès à l'eau, on l'a dit tout à l'heure, qui est une ressource vitale, c'est un droit humain fondamental. L'eau ne doit pas être vue comme une simple marchandise. Et la question de l'assainissement est une question de dignité. Donc quand on met ensemble l'eau et l'assainissement, nous tous qui travaillons sur ces problématiques sommes de fait au cœur du développement humain de nos peuples. Et pour finir, je le dirai encore, et ça je crois que tout le monde est d'accord là-dessus, on parle des ODD, on parle de tout l'effort qu'il faut faire à l'échelle internationale pour l'atteinte des objectifs du développement durable, mais il est évident que si nous n'atteignons pas l'objectif de développement durable, l'ODD 6, aucun des autres ODD ne pourrait être atteint, puisqu'on ne peut pas parler de questions d'accès de la nourriture, de la santé ou des autres promotions des femmes ou égalité entre les sexes, si on ne règle pas en amont la question de l'accès équitable, juste à l'eau et aussi à l'assainissement. Donc ce sont ces problématiques fondamentales qui, en tout cas au niveau du Sénégal, qui sont inscrites au cœur de tout ce que nous faisons et en perspective de la conférence internationale de 2026 avec notre partenaire des Émirats arabes unis, mais en portant nous, en bâtissant sur notre expérience partagée avec nos pays voisins, mais également avec l'Afrique. C'est tout ça qu'on va porter au niveau international et continuer à nous battre pour l'hydrodiplomatie et pour faire de l'eau un levier de paix et de prospérité, mais pas un facteur de désunion ou de conflit.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. You highlight the important role of river basin organizations on building capacities on states and building peace and stability between riparian countries. And you highlight also the important role of experience sharing and knowledge sharing between riparian countries. Excellency, Honorable Minister from South Africa, Your Excellency, Majordina, we know that in recent years, South Africa have faced significant water scarcity issues. What are the obstacles in advancing on SDG 6 in your country? Can you talk to us about some obstacles?
Thank you very much, moderator. Moderator, in SADC, we know no war on sharing water from the rivers. And that is the call that I want to make to the entire continent. That let's not see war or conflict based on sharing of this precious resource, which is a natural resource, water. We say water is life, sanitation is dignity, and therefore we need a political will from all states to ensure that we commit to the protocols, we commit to the political structure, which is the Ministers' Forum. We also commit to a technical structure through the commissioners, underpinned by finance, the legal task team, the water task team, to ensure that, as my honorable minister from Senegal have said, that if we are to achieve SDG 6, we must cooperate, we must work together. It is important also to note that government alone, with the very low economic growth, might not be able to meet all the financial constraints, and therefore it is important to work together with the public-private partnership, as well as inviting NGOs. Let water issues be in a partnership. Let everyone own up for us to be able to move forward towards the achievement and attainment of SDG 6. The regional climate framework is what we have in SADC, which we developed to address the impact of climate change on shared resources, promoting a coordinated responses to mitigate the risks as well as to enhance resilience. We know Africans by nature are very resilient, and therefore if we work together, nothing is going to defeat us. Africa is getting poorer day by day because of our own egos. We must deal with our egos. We have natural resources, we have mineral resources. If we work together as Africa, Africa will prosper. We'll see Agenda 2063 being achieved in the continent. As I close off, moderator, South Africa is sharing rivers, as I said earlier on. We have Orange Sinku River, where we work with Lesotho, Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. It's 4 of us. No war, no conflict. We respect the sovereignty of each and every country. Because when we are to maintain those projects that we are sharing, those rivers, those tunnels, those canals, each and every country must budget through its own fiscal. And currently, as I speak to you, moderator and honorable participants here, we have closed down the tunnel of Lesotho Highlands, which provide water to South Africa, because if you don't maintain the infrastructure, but when you do that, both countries have committed to ensure that they put budget aside, they monitor to ensure that that maintenance is done for us to be able to grow and fast track the access of water to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. In SADC region knows no war in sharing water. This is the message that we can have regarding your speech, and public partnership can help to accelerate progress. We must work together around water issues on SADC region, but even also in Africa. Thank you for this insight. Honorable Minister from Zimbabwe, how can international water courses laws are relevant human rights law to be better upheld?
Well, let me just be more contextual rather than speak at the international level and draw and build on the explanation by the minister from South Africa. And indicate that once you put in place the political, the legal, the institutional framework, such as we've done with ZAMCOM, and Zimbabwe has 6 river basins. Of the 6, we have 5 where we've formed river basin organizations, and these are working very well. So there's been a replication of the ZAMCOM model because of its success. And where we do not have models, we go into bilateral agreements. For example, with South Africa, there are northern parts where there is drier. We supply the water from Zimbabwe. We do similar arrangements that we're building elsewhere. So I believe that before you look at the international level, what is very critical is to be able to build a strong base, a strong foundation. And if there is that strong cooperation at a political level and is institutionalized and you have undergirding by this strong legal framework where there is the domestication of the regional framework at a national level, it means that you are becoming more contextual relevant and you are able to deal with things within that context. But you also need to have this live document that it takes into account the changing nature of circumstances and objectives. Climate change is real, and Southern Africa is predicted to become drier in the decades ahead. So you need to bring climate change issues into ZAMCOM. You need to bring disaster risk management issues into that ZAMCOM so that that framework remains strong. So as long as it remains that strong, then it means that you have a mechanism to bind everyone because they see the value of working together. They see the value of joint planning. They see the value of joint monitoring. They see the value of joint reaction to any disasters that might actually come together. So once you do so, then you have less and less likelihood of conflicts. However, should there be those conflicts, then perhaps quite a few countries within the SADC region have not ratified these the 1992 and 1997 conventions. So I believe that although, yes, that could be aspirational at national level to eventually accede to that, but what you have is this common regional framework that recognizes water as a fundamental constitutional right, that recognizes water as an economic enabler, that with it you can accelerate development, you can catalyze development, and if there is that common understanding between and among countries, then you are likely, most of the time, not to have that conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Water as economic enabler and the model of ZAMCOW that we must share in Africa. Dr. Hassan, how can transboundary impact assessments help protect communities facing water scarcity and stress?
Thank you so much, moderators. As we know that Sudan is lines in arid and semi-arid zones. So Sudan, beside this arid and semi-arid zones, Sudan is also facing desertifications and facing the conflicts, in addition to climate change. In fact, what Sudan had a very good experience regarding the issue of what do you call water harvesting. For this water harvesting, Sudan had a very good experience in building or establishment of hafir, what do you call hafir, and small dams in the small streams you call wadis. So we are trying to overcome these problems by doing these things. What we see nowadays, we are looking for, in addition, things for this transboundary issues so as to cooperate. That's why we are, in my first speech, we hope that to reach what we have in Senegal and Zimbabwe, what you have, these guys, they reach a very nice kind of cooperation so as to overcome water scarcity and something like that. So we in fact, let me call upon all the other friends in international community or in Africa so as to work together so as to overcome this water scarcity. In Sudan nowadays, we see now we are lying in the desert. So there is no any other alternative for the water. We don't have such the amount of water which we rain in Sudan is not that the huge ones. So we are looking forward for the cooperation among the countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Prof. Attila, how does international water laws deals with situations in which a riparian state doesn't take all appropriate measures?
Well, thank you very much. Since your question is very clear to me and the answer will come short, maybe short and sweet, may I react very quickly to suggestion coming from Dr. Musa? I am very optimistic that the reform you would like to encourage to be engaged into is already there. I mean, I believe that an international judge tomorrow would consider and apply international water law as having a human rights dimension already incorporated into it, despite this unfelicitous, without prejudice formula of the Human Rights Council. I mean, so much water has passed under the bridges in which you have incorporation between environmental law and human rights law in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, European Court of Human Rights, General Assembly. I mean, it's there. The two water conventions are clearly environmental conventions, so the human rights dimension is absolutely there on an interpretative basis, as I say it, but maybe I'm too optimistic. Very quickly, I mean, what happens if a state does not take all appropriate measures? Let me just recall a little bit the travaux, how this expression, all appropriate measures, came about in New York after the International Law Commission in its travaux préparatoire has changed the language from states shall exercise due diligence, which is pretty general and vague, into all appropriate measures. It was quite a purported change. So to the extent that we believe that this is a standard which applies on the same level as it would apply to ultra-hazardous activities. So you really want to take serious care of what you do in order, under your capacity, differentiated capacity, of course, to do your utmost. So against that background, what are the appropriate measures to be taken? Most of them, which gives substance to the no-harm principle. Basically, procedural rules, put in place a permit system with regard to activities that may have a transboundary adverse impact. And then you would complement that permit system with environmental impact assessment. I believe, yes, soft law, but building up to a quite significant body of practice of social impact assessment from those who plan measures, and you want to have an appropriate public authority system which scrutinizes environmental impact assessment. And once you have that at home, you want that to transmit, and here the transboundary part comes into play with the obligation of notification and possibly consultation if need be. Now, there are elements of potential unilateralism, which is the elephant in the room and behind any transboundary water issues. Unilateral assessment by lower riparian countries, unilateral assessments by upper riparians, they do not coincide. What shall we do? Well, let's cooperate, fine, and what if they don't want to cooperate? Let's provide for the frameworks for such cooperation, unless you want to go to a third party. Now, adjudication is not liked by many. Then you have in the New York Convention compulsory fact-finding under Article 33, and then you have something different and special in the UNEC Convention, which is the Implementation Committee. And the Implementation Committee is meant not to be adversarial, adjudicative. And I can stop there by evoking a success story, which is a case in which one state, it's in the public domain, Montenegro, came to us and said, listen, but in Albania, they have already put in place and they are planning hydropower plants which we know nothing about their impact, and we have no information, we are very unhappy about it, and we want to build a case, unless we have clarity. So we approached Albania and said, would you like to collaborate in trying to provide clarity about this? And we have been working back to back with these two states for the last 3 years, and now they are coming in Ljubljana, I believe next week, possibly, fingers crossed, entering into a protocol of cooperation on data exchange and cooperation at the wider level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Komlan, for your last question, how to accelerate the achievement of indicators 6.5.2 based on the outcome of progress on transboundary water cooperation?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The report provides a set of recommendations, but I will focus on just three. So the first one, when it comes to help the country to ensure that all the countries sharing transboundary waters to achieve the full coverage, the first one is to address what we call the data gaps, in particular on transboundary aquifers, and both on availability of those data, but also data exchange, because those two elements came at the top three, among the top three challenges that the countries are facing when it comes to the transboundary cooperation. So I think it's quite interesting also to see in the report some examples of countries using the 652 monitoring exercise to really develop a deeper shared understanding of transboundary waters and also have a kind of dialogue between them. The second element that I want to put forward is that maybe the recommendation that have been made in this report is really to encourage countries to consider exploring benefits in joining those two UN global conventions, so the 1992 Water Convention and the 1997 Water Courses Conventions, and to use them as a means really to enhance the political will to support transboundary water cooperation, but also to develop agreements and legal arrangement. And in that respect, under the Water Convention, an expert group worked to develop what we call a practical guide for the development of agreement and other arrangement to transboundary water cooperation, and which was, we will say, actually is the kind of really useful tool, because we see a lot of interest of countries around the world who are started to apply this tool. We have, for instance, an example here in Africa, where we are supporting Zambia and DRC to develop an agreement on two river basins that they share together. So we really help them to apply this tool to fast track, and also came to have an agreement which is reflect the interest of the two parties. The other one point that I want to mention is the funding. Funding also is among the top three. So I mentioned the element related to the data, and the top three, so the third one is the funding which is key. Many countries raise the fact that they require more funding to support transboundary cooperation. Of course, national fundings remain the key funding source, especially to cover the joint bodies, but we need more financing really to be mobilized for national sources from transboundary cooperation. And in that respect, something is also interesting when it comes to the report, the fact that climate change is not just challenge, but also opportunities. So to see how countries can really use to explore also opportunities. So I wrap up quickly. So how the countries can use the finance challenges to leverage climate finance to support transboundary cooperation. And we have a couple of examples across Africa. I think this is really important. And my last one is partnership. Partners are key. I think this is really important. Under the UN, we just adopted this year the UN system-wide strategy for water and sanitation, but also this transboundary water cooperation coalition that have been launched in 2022, which are a kind of important vehicles in this regard. And we really want that all the partners to use this 652 report to support the country in enhancing their cooperation over their transboundary water resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Komlan. And the last question for Jasmine. How does the principle of vital human needs protect community-facing water scarcity?
Thank you so much.
You have 2 minutes. We have to conclude.
Yes, I think I've already answered that question, so
Okay.
just very quickly to react to what has been said. First of all, just to really thank those speakers, the honourable ministers that really emphasized the importance of political will and the importance of cooperation and how there are many success stories that we can really build upon. And I think that is the key thing, that when there is political will to cooperate, we can do so regardless of the upstream, downstream dynamic, which should not be there if we are looking at the watercourse as a single unit. The second thing, when it comes to the issue raised by Professor Tanzi of integrating human rights in the law of watercourses and the role of international courts, I agree fully that this perspective is often adopted by international courts, but I would say more so when we're looking at a domestic setting. So if we're going to integrate a human rights approach in the uses of a watercourse within the territory of a state. But once we come into the transboundary setting, then we need to be able to more clearly see how a state can be held responsible for violating the human rights of downstream communities in another state and across a political boundary. And that is something that I think we're going to be seeing in the upcoming ICJ advisory opinion on climate change, for example. It's really going to tell us how do we deal with issues of attribution, with issues of state responsibility when it comes to this kind of breach and violation. So I think to wrap up, because we're running out of time, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to now open the panel to the audience. I just want to give the floor to 1 or 2 people from the audience if you have questions with the distinguished panelists. Any question from the audience? It means that panelists was very clear on their messages. Now I would like to thank the panelists for their contribution and inspiration. I think that we can applaud them, and they have a good job. As the end of the high-level panel, I would like to thank speakers for the quality of their contributions. Before closing, I would like to share with you 4 key takeaways from our discussion of this panel, high-level panel. First, the critical role of cooperation. The message coming from panelists is we must foster inclusive governance models. Countries must navigate the complexity of shared water management, enhance mutual benefits. Minister of Senegal and Minister from Zimbabwe share with us how their models are very successful models and promote sustainable development. We must promote sustainable development. The second takeaway is regarding the integrated approach to water management. Strategic that aligns policies across sectors can maximize resource efficiency and address the competing demands arising from climate variability and population growth, etc. The third message coming from the discussion of today, it's regarding innovative solutions and best practices. We highlight the successful case studies and innovative practice from various regions from West Africa, East Africa, and from the Nile River perspective also. And we also see that this example not only demonstrate effective governance models, but also provide actionable insight for replicating success in different contexts. And the last takeaway is the importance of legal and institutional frameworks. We know that international water laws plays a vital role in fostering collaboration, conflict resolution, and sustainable management of shared water resources. ultimately contributing to the achievement of SDG 6. And we must take into account these international water laws, human right to water, but also all the arrangement regarding water share basins organizations. Thank you for listening us, and let's round of applause for these panelists, and see you next time. We will have now a group photo for the panelists.